We are continuing to follow developing news this morning after a deadly midair collision took place between an American Airlines passenger jet and an Army helicopter just outside of Washington, D.C. last night. Both aircraft crashed into the Potomac River, where a massive search is underway. For the latest, we're joined now by Global's Washington Bureau Chief, Jackson Proskow. So Jackson, we've now heard from officials. So what's the latest update about what happened here?
Yeah, Miranda, regrettably, this is no longer a rescue mission. It is now a recovery mission. The local fire chief says the assumption is that everyone involved in the crash has died. At this point, they say they've pulled roughly 27 bodies from the icy Potomac River, 27 from the plane, one from the helicopter at this point. But they say there's little reason to believe that anyone is still alive. This happened around 9 p.m. last night, this collision midair. What we've heard from officials is that both the American Airlines flight, which was a Canadian-built Bombardier CRJ 700 with 60 passengers and 4 crew on board, and the Army helicopter, which had 3 crew on board. They say both of those were in normal approach patterns to D.C.'s Reagan National Airport when this collision took place for some reason that's still not yet known. That this was all on final approach at this point. And they say that the aircraft plummeted into the water, both of them. They have since located both aircraft in the water. They say that the passenger plane broke into 3 sections and that the fuselage is actually upside down in water that is about waist deep. But again, at this point, it's simply a focus on recovering the bodies. We should say that hundreds of rescue workers rushed to the scene last night, wading into water that is right around the freezing temperature. We should also tell you here that in addition to those really cold water temperatures, the weather conditions overall really difficult last night. High winds, cold temperatures. That said, they do not believe that weather would have been a factor in this crash. It was perfectly clear out. But certainly, as families come to Reagan National Airport now to try and grieve and learn more information from the airlines, the question of how this could have happened at one of the busiest airports in the United States is going to weigh very heavy for them this morning.
Absolutely. That is the big question here, I think, Jackson. You know, how could this have happened? It's my understanding the airspace around Washington, D.C. is quite complicated. So could that have been a factor?
Yes, so there's a couple things to keep in mind here. One is that the airspace is heavily restricted because of the White House and the Capitol building and the proximity of Reagan Airport to both of those things. And so when aircraft approach, they are under control tower guidance the entire time. They have to fly a very specific course that follows the path essentially of the Potomac River. At the same time, you've got a lot of cross traffic. You do have military traffic that operates in the area. There is actually a military base directly across from where this crash happened, Joint Base Anacostia Bowling. There is the Pentagon as well, and there are helicopter shuttle flights that run back and forth between those bases and Joint Base Andrews, where the president often flies from. So there is a lot of helicopter activity in the vicinity of Reagan Airport at the same time. That is a constant. And if you've ever been to Washington, the helicopters and the low-flying planes are both constant fixtures of all of that. And then the last thing is, because of that heavily restricted airspace, the approach to Reagan Airport is very difficult. And the runways actually extend out into the Potomac River, into the water. Pilots jokingly call it the aircraft carrier because it's a very difficult landing and approach. And so all those complexities will be things that are analyzed here by accident investigators as they try to figure out what exactly could have happened, which aircraft may have been in the wrong, and how they could have actually come into contact with each other.
All right, and Jackson, how big of a hub is Reagan National Airport, and how is this incident, this crash, impacting its operations?
By aircraft movement, so the number of flights per day, the main runway there is one of the busiest in the United States, and it is a major hub for American Airlines, which was involved in this crash last night, both for domestic and regional flying. So yes, tons of traffic that come in and out of there. The airport is currently scheduled to be closed until 11 a.m. local time this morning. It's not clear if that might be extended even further, but certainly it's going to have a major impact on air traffic right across the eastern U.S. this morning because this is such an important hub.
Okay, and of course, the families of the victims also top of mind right now, Jackson. What more do we know about the passengers on board each aircraft?
Yeah, only scant details trickling out at this point. This flight was coming from Wichita, Kansas to Washington, D.C. What stands out, though, is that there had been a national figure skating training camp in Wichita these past few days. And our understanding is from U.S. figure skating that several athletes and coaches were on board that flight, as well as 2 Russian Olympians who had all been returning from that event. So there is an expectation that the figure skating community in particular is going to be very, very hard hit by this, just based on the group that was traveling together on that flight.
All right, just a tragic story there, Jackson. Thank you so much for that update. We'll continue to follow it closely. That is Global's Washington Bureau Chief, Jackson Proskow.